Hi everyone. Before we get into the point, let me introduce myself and my partner first. My name is Gan and my partner Net. During the next hour, we'll be taking you to explore the history of people from India entering America from the 1700s to the present day. I'm hoping to give you an overview of the characterization of Indian immigrants, the reason for them coming to America, and the push factor of Indian immigrants. You may already know that the United States is far and away the most popular destination for world immigrants. Mostly, people moved to the United States in the past for the same reasons as today: to join their families, to work, and to seek opportunity and safety from violence and natural disasters. As a matter of fact, the United States is the second most popular destination for Indians living abroad after the United Arab Emirates. Historically, immigrants from India first arrived in the United States in small numbers during the early 19th century, primarily as low-skilled farm laborers. There were a handful of Indians who kind of trickled through for some reason or another before the turn of the century, but in 1899 was when the first group of Indians arrived, and they were Sikh. After this, a steady stream of immigrants arrived. By 1915, there were about 7,000 Asian Indians in America. About 85% of them were Sikhs, as they were recorded as a significant wave of Indian immigrants. In this presentation, we will focus mainly on the emphasis of Sikh in the US throughout the presentation. Well, who are the Sikhs? There are nearly 30 million Sikhs around the world today, and a vast majority of them live in the Indian state of Punjab. Much of the diaspora is concentrated in the Commonwealth due to migration within the British Empire, yet Sikhs continue to establish themselves in various countries throughout the world. Also, there are over 500,000 Sikhs in America, and the largest concentrations of Sikhs in America live in California, New York, and New Jersey. Let's see the general fast fact to get to know Sikh before I get into the immigration part. In America, 99% of the people you see wearing a turban are Sikhs. Also, Sikhs have been in America for over 100 years. And Sikhs share basic values with Americans: the importance of equality, religious pluralism, and justice for all. Sikhism is the fifth largest world religion after Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism. They are referred to as Hindus in those repeating the phrase that conflated with Indian ethnicity. Sikhism is classified as an Indian religion along with Hinduism. From the time of their arrival in the late 1800s, Sikh men have been making notable contributions to American society. Early immigrants settled in the western frontier, where they play a major role in building America's railroads. Earlier than that, there were people from India who were indentured laborers or slaves. So here is a newspaper by a slave owner of an Indian slave. This newspaper was formed 1776. The slave owner was putting an ad for the runaway indentured servant, John Newton, who was actually an Indian. They are referred to as an East Indians and were bought by colonists. Moreover, some of them had worked with the East India Company previously prior to coming to America. America has brought Indians with them. They were baptized and then given Christian names on the boat before they landed. So, John Newton was the Christian name given to him. To an extent, the indentured slave type Indians would get merged with the African community African slaves. We'll move on to the history account of the first wave of Indian immigrants. This is an article in the San Francisco Chronicle in 1899, which is when the first group of Indians really arrived. They came on the Nippon Maru, the boat, or a steamship. Even though their presence remained relatively small at first, but as new opportunities arose in the middle of the 20th century, the population grew larger in following decades. So Indians arrived by boat too, and they arrived after passing the seven seas on an island like all the other European immigrants who came to this country from different parts of the world. At first, they were described as fine-looking men and a marvel of physical beauty because their appearance stood out from the others, but later on the problem of the rapid increasing influx of Indian immigrants affected standards of labor, wages, or communities. Thus, the racial discrimination against the Indian immigrants began to rise within the U.S. In Astoria, Oregon, by 1906, nearly 100 Indian workers lived together on the street the locals called Hindu Alley, even though most were Sikhs, not Hindus. People over there were very nervous about them because they were all very tall and they all have turbans, and they could not figure it out why they were have to wear it. And for finally after 1.5 years, they found that these are very peaceful workers. They just want to work. They never want to do anything. And the people find out too that they work hard and save money back home. But fear sometimes overtook reason. In 1907, tensions got out of control in the northwest mill town of Bellingham, Washington. The local newspaper reported this is the type of man driven from this city as the result of last night's demonstration by a mob of 300 men. The laws were completely against them. They were not allowed to bring their wives or were not allowed to bring relatives. They were not allowed to visit back and forth between India and the US. After 1910, new Indian arrivals might be endlessly detained and scrutinized at the immigration center on the Angel Island. Finally, in 1917, the Bart-Zone Act cut off all Asian immigrants.
In my mind, it was strict racism that they didn't want these brown people to come here and live and work.
As I said, a lot of Indians took up farming and they typically worked in the Sacramento Valley and Sanjakon Valley, which reminded them of the fertile fields of the Punjab. These places are located in the area of the Central Valley of the U.S. state of California. The Central Valley can be divided into two large parts. The northern is known as the Sacramento Valley, and the southern is known as the Sanjakon Valley. These California North and South are very fertile away from the ocean. At first, Sikhs became part of the cycle of migrant labor. Given their strong work ethic and their heritage of farming experience from the Punjab, Sikhs were later hired as permanent farmhands and even managers, turning their hand to everything from rice to peaches to cotton. They leased land and some acquired the capital necessary to buy a few acres. Back in 1900s, there were more than 2,000 Indian Sikhs living in the United States, primarily in California. So huge numbers of Sikhs have settled there even now.
In general, they had a very, very good life. They achieved something. Some of them own thousands and thousands of acres of land, even though they have no education. They couldn't even sign it.
For many, it was the triumph of a lifetime.
Here we have a couple of shots of the kind of lodging that these immigrants had, and they typically live in a room with several men. They were mostly single. When they came, they didn't bring their wives and families, so they lived and they shared accommodation. Although there was a lot of famine in Punjab at the time, which was what motivated them to come in the first place. Anyway, the way that they lived was not a step up. They were here for a reason, to make some money, and then actually the intention was to go back to the India. During the 1940s, Nehru, the first prime minister of the newly independent country, began to build the elite public education system that would become the social and economic backbone of modern India. In the US, after World War II, where people from many different ethnic backgrounds fought side by side as American soldiers, there was a new openness about immigration. In 1946, the Lucilla Act was passed, which allowed Asian Indians to become American citizens, finally after 40 years as a farm laborer became a landowner. Then a report on the largest influx of Indian immigrants in the US, illustrated by the graph of Indian-born immigrants in the United States by period of arrival, 2019. The largest share of Indians, approximately 41%, arrived in 2010 or later. Using data from the U.S. Census Bureau, the Indian immigrant population in the United States increased rapidly from 1980 to 2019 due to the development of the technology and the landmark of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, which opened the gates to skilled professionals worldwide. So they came urban people from all over India, not just from the Punjab speaking area, but from all over India. And they were so diverse, so that they brought their wives and children with them, and they came as family units. Top destination states for Indian-born immigrants in the United States from 2014 to 2018, highly concentrated in California, followed by Texas and New Jersey. Although the recent data of the largest influx of Indian immigrants in the US shows that in the early 21st century considered the largest share of Indian immigrants in the United States, the number of Indian immigrants reached a peak of over 5,000 in the early 20th century, which the controversy over the flood of the turbans as the influx of Indians on the Pacific coast is known was provoked by this sudden increase. The first Indians to arrive were from Canada, and their experience promoted continuous immigration for Indian ports to the United States. Because of the quick increase in numbers, as well as the fact that many of the Indians found work very immediately in the construction of a railroad near San Francisco. As a result of the establishment of limits on Asian immigration, the number of Asian immigrants has decreased. Finally, I'll talk about the situation in the old country, or the push factor of the Indian immigrants, particularly to the US. Initially, members of the East India Company began bringing Indian laborers to the American colonies in the 18th century. During the American colonial period, there were also some East Indian slaves in the United States. The earliest recorded Indian immigrants to the United States was from Madras, who traveled to Massachusetts in 1790s. A number of Indians were brought to the United States by seafaring captains who worked for the East India Company to serve in their households as servants. Most importantly, as I've mentioned before, in the 20th century, the first big wave of Indian immigrants arrived in the United States More than 2,000 Indian Sikhs lived in the United States by 1900, mostly in California. Diaspora from India was caused by problems faced by Indian farmers such as those posed by the colonial land tenure system for small landowners, as well as drought and food shortages, which provoked in the 1890s. Simultaneously, Canadian shipping firms recruited Sikh farmers with economic opportunities in British Columbia on behalf of Pacific Coast employers. Along with the spread of the possible opportunities for success for agricultural and industrial workers in Canada and the United States, Sikhs from the province of Punjab in northern India had been serving for generations in the military units of the British ports in Asia. They got a chance to contact those who had worked in the US and were given the dreamy picture of the economic prospects in both these countries. Consequently, when their military service was completed, several of them started to migrate to Canada. Some of these Sikhs stayed in Canada, while those who went to India spread stories of the richness of opportunities available in the Canadian Dominion for honest and responsible workers. Though everything seemed to be going well at first, racial hatred quickly grew, and protests against the importation of these foreign immigrants began, not only from their co-workers but also from the employers who had assisted them to get to Canada. The Indian immigrants began to confront hostility and opposition. These early arrivals, however, were turbaned and bearded, and most of them were Sikhs, and their unusual look and distinctive habits and rituals prevented them from fitting in as integral people in the society within which they belonged. Getting away from racial attacks in the Canada, Sikh settlers began coming to the United States in search of jobs and good farmland. Many of the new settlers came through Vancouver and then moved south along the west coast, working in the lumber industry, in railroad construction, and on farms. Generally, the great majority of Indian immigrants today are young and well educated with excellent English skills. The start of the 21st century was a significant moment in the migration movement from India to the United States. The introduction of economic liberalization impacted the overall migration flow. The development of the technology industry in the major cities in India resulted in a great deal of people migrating to the United States. Many people work in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Nowadays, with an average household income nearly twice as much as the American, Indian Americans have grown to become America's wealthiest ethnicity. To point out, when we look at the history of how Indians immigrated to the United States, we're usually looking through the eyes of Western or white journalists, how they stereotype Indian immigrants. I wanted to present the other dimensions of their circumstances and the truth of the long struggle of their ancestors. The Indians are also pioneers. They also built America as they were doing farming and railroad, all sorts of jobs. It's a hard-earned success of the Indian community since 100 years ago, which should not be discriminated against.
I think for those who came in the late 60s and 70s, the greatest challenge is their children. They fear greatly for their children. I don't think they should. Their children know what they're doing. They're Americans through and through.
Which is in a way good because they don't have any conflict in their minds or in their hearts.
They will get a lot of good points from this great country. They will melt. They will not remain Indian. Okay, there'll be different type of Indian. Their brain will be like a Western type, but they will look like Indian.
The great thing about Indian culture and Indian heritage is that it sort of sticks on you.
In Silicon Valley, the Indian people are very proud to be belonging to a heritage and a culture that is so ancient, that is, really thousands of years old.
Hi, so let's talk about what problem did the Indian immigrants face.
In the 19th century, there was an increase in migration of Asian immigrants, including Hindus and Sikhs, from the Indian subcontinent. Many of the immigrants worked as low-wage laborers in the Pacific Northwest. By the 1900s, media campaign had started to ban Indians from entering the USA. During this time, it is considered as a period of Hindu phobia. Congress passed the Naturalization Act of 1906, which restricted the naturalized citizenship, thus essentially excluding Asians from U.S. citizenship and suppressing the entire Hindu and Sikh community in the United States. Furthermore, it was used to restrict Punjabis from owning land. American immigration officials began to use a clause in extant immigration law to prevent the entry of Indians for three reasons. The first is the Indians are being labeled as liable to becoming a public charge. Next, a carrier of dangerous contagious disease. And the third is violating the alien contract labor law. The anxiety about national origin of undesired immigrants, especially from India, was in part due to the anti-colonial movement. Indian immigrants who crossed the northern border into the United States were under surveillance by U.S. border officials because the latter were concerned that Indians' unhindered mobility would reinforce the anti-colonial movement in India. One of the reasons the anti-colonial movement was important to American border officials was because it questioned white supremacy and demanded independence from colonial rule in India. The lack of American support for the anti-colonial movement in India, as well as the discrimination that Indians face, created an inclusive Indian identity in the United States. In North America, discrimination forced Indians to build bonds across caste and religious lines, and nationalism came to be seen as a powerful antidote to the feeling of helplessness. This brought to the surface white settler colonists' anxiety about white jobs being taken away. As much as discrimination played an important part in uniting Indians across caste and religious lines, the presence of Indians united white workers on both sides of US and Canada border. Discrimination against Indians thus further racialized them and created a solidarity, perhaps even an ethnic identity among them. In parallel, discrimination against Indians became the rally call in an effort toward a more systematic legislative avenue to address the Hindu menace. a distinctly anti-radical racial formation that linked radical and aliens, in the eye of U.S. officials, demand Indian exclusion and deportation. And now it's question time. What is the name of the act that gave immigrants legal permanent resident status? Moving on to the next point, contributions of Indian immigrants to American culture. The key contribution. Indian immigrants have been a major driving force in the creation of new technology, science, and media in the United States. Many talented Indians have made progress and held a prominent position in the world of technology in America. Almost every U.S. technology corporation has Indian technology pioneers, including the fathers of USB and technology blogging. Indian immigrants are among the wealthiest communities in the U.S. Another key contribution is form of art. The Americans compounded some of Indian dance form into their own new functional dance form. Bharata, Natyam, Ras, Garba, Bhangra, and Indian film dance are principally the most popular dance forms found throughout America. Also, Indian immigrants introduced yoga, a practice that brings together physical and mental disciplines to achieve peace and relaxation. It helps manage stress, which quickly became popular and integrated into the American culture. Now, let's talk about famous Indian immigrants. First, Yella Pragada Subbaro. He is a biochemist, physiologist, and physician known for discovering the role of ATP in muscular activity and synthesis of methotrexate or the cancer drugs. He also developed heterosan, which was used by the World Health Organization against filariasis. Now, let's get into more detail about his biography. After earning a diploma from the Howard University School of Tropical Medicine in June 1924, he managed to join Howard Medical School. Subbaro began working in his biochemistry laboratory, where they developed the Fish-Subbaro method for the estimation of phosphorus in body fluids and tissues. In 1929, he co-authored his first scientific paper about his discovery of a simple color test to determine the amount of phosphorus in biological tissue. In detail, it is a method for estimation of phosphorus in body fluids and tissues. The following years, he was the first Indian in Howard history to earn a biochemistry PhD. In 1941, he recruited into his team a retired professor of mycology, Professor Benjamin Duca, as a consultant in mycology research for discovering a newer antibiotics, and then went to discover polymyxin in 1945. He was the first researcher to synthesize amitriptyline, a chemical analog of folic acid. The research was prompted by a study that showed children with leukemia got significantly worse when fed a diet rich in folic acid. Subbaro wondered if an analog that was hostile to folic acid might have the opposite effect. Sidney Farber, a pathologist at Boston Children's Hospital, made a breakthrough with Subaru's analog, proving that it was a potent inhibitor of connective tissues proliferations and effective in psoriasis. Then he finally developed the first effective chemotherapy agent. Next famous immigrant is Dalip Singh Son. Dalip Singh Son is known to many as George and also nicknamed the Peacemaker. He is the first Asian, first Indian American, first Sikh, and first follower of non-Abrahamic religion to be elected to serve as a United States representative. In 1952, Son ran for judicial election. He faced a barrage of discriminations. Voters and even old friends told Son that they liked him well enough but could never bring themselves to go for a Hindu judge. During Son's 4-year judgeship, Son worked to institute stiff sentencing that helped clean up blight areas of Westmoreland. He earned a reputation as a first-rate legal mind, going head-to-head with more practiced attorneys. In 1957, Dalip Singh Son was sworn in as the congressional representative of California's 29th district. During his career in the House of Representatives, at the height of Cold War, Son became something of a transcendent politician who had the singular ability to engage audiences abroad. Although he frequently confronted discrimination during his life in the United States, Son maintained his belief in promises of American democracy. Moving on to the next famous Indian immigrants. Narinder Singh Kapani. Narinder Singh Kapani is known as the father of fiber optic communications. Kapani played an important role in advancing the field both as a researcher and as the founder of several optical technology companies. His research and inventions have encompassed fiber optics communications, lasers, biomedical instrumentation, solar energy, and pollution monitoring. He was a member of U.S. National Inventors Council. Moving on. Kalpana Chawla. Chawla was an Indian American astronaut and engineer who was the first woman of Indian origin to go to space. She earned a doctorate in aerospace engineering from the University of Colorado in 1988, having previously obtained her master's degree from the University of Texas. She began working at NASA's Research Center the same year, working on the power-lift computational fluids dynamics. In 1994, Chawla was selected as an astronaut candidate. After a year of training, she became a crew representative for the astronaut office, EVA Robotics, and computer branches. She worked with robotic situational awareness displays and tested software for the space shuttles. She first flew on Space Shuttle Columbia in 1997. After Chawla's death, she was awarded the Congressional Space Medal of Honor. Next, Ajay V. Bhatt, Indian-American computer architect who developed a number of widely used technologies, including USB, AGP, PCI Express, platform power management architecture, and many chipsets improvements. Through an Intel 2009 TV commercial, Ajay Bhatt became a global superstar as the co-inventor of USB. In 2002, he received an Achievement in Excellence award of his contribution to the development of PCI Express specification. Shantanu Narayan is Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of Adobe, one of the largest and most diversified software companies in the world. Shantanu is Vice Chairman of the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum and sits on the board of Pfizer. He is a former director of Dell and is recognized by President Barack Obama in 2011 by appointing him as a member of U.S. President Management Advisory Board. Now, let's move on to the next topic, Indian immigrant stereotypes. Some of the first Indians group abroad due to the high demand of construction work in America. They want a cheap labor force, so many Indians are recruited to work as manual laborers to build railroads and other infrastructure. Therefore, in early days, Indians immigrants were stereotyped by the Americans as poor, dirty, scantily clad, infected with contagious diseases, undesirable people, and inferior laborers. Americans see Indians as one homogeneous culture. Indians are merely seen on a shallow level and do not seem to be portrayed with more than one dimension. They generalize all Indians to have dark skin, curly hair, very conservative, caste-ridden, patriarchy, and curry body odor. One apparent stereotype of Indians is patanking, a word used to describe an exaggerated Indian accent with broad acting, which is seen as monkey-like behavior. Moreover, the head wobble or the head shakes are embedded into American stereotype of characterizing Indians people. The Indians are stereotyped into being shopkeeper, the taxi drivers, call center, and in modern times, being engineer, doctors, and IT professionals. In the present time, Indian people in the US already suffer from image of being academically good, champion of spelling bees, geeky, unexciting, nerdy, and unsexy. Next, let's talk about image portrayed in media. Indians have been misrepresented in TV shows and movies, contributing to false images about their personality and culture. These are the example of character in TV shows and movies present in American media. First is Apu. Apu, a recurring character in American animated television series The Simpsons. First aired in 1990 in the season 1 episode The Telltale Head. His character has orange skin and talks in a mocking sing-song way. Apu is an Indian immigrant who holds a PhD in computer science but chooses to run a kiosk E-Mart in Springfield. Apu is voiced by a white guy, which reflects the industry standard for Indian American characterization. Apu's character emphasizes his accent and his subservience. Apu is portrayed as a clown-like or goofy character and a conservative character.
Can you believe it? Tradition forbids me even to speak to the woman I'm about to spend my life with. Has the whole world gone crazy?
Nah, just your screwy country.
Your old friend Apu is a lamb being led to the slaughter.
Don't worry, Apu. Someday you'll meet someone you really love.
I am really doomed. Only the gods could stop this wedding now.
God.
Next, Raj Kutrapali is a character in CBS television series The Big Bang Theory, first aired in 2007. He is one of the four main characters. He is an astrophysicist. His character is portrayed as someone with a shocking lack of social skills, geek, sexually repressed, awkward, and uncomfortable with women.
Hello?
Hello.
What's your name?
My name is Siri.
Look at that. There's finally a woman in your life you can talk to. Are you single?
Thank you. It's nice to be appreciated.
I bet it is. Why don't women like me?
Let me check on that. How about a web search for why don't women like me?
No need. I've already done that. Siri, do you have a last name?
My name is Siri.
Oh, one name. Like Cher, Madonna, Adele. All the women who rock me. My name is Rajesh, but you can call me Raj.
This condition of social anxiety, particularly speaking with women, could be suppressed through alcohol. Raj became a stereotype for white people. He is a typical brown guy with an exotic accent, crippled by his inability to speak to women. Moreover, he also suffered from an arranged matchmaking that his Indian family set him up with, the family choice of suitable women. This is a stereotype of an Indian culture that gives negative connotation to Indian matchmaking. Next, Ravi, a character from Jessie, a Disney TV show aired in 2011, portrayed a kid that is originally from India before being adopted by American family. Ravi had an overly exaggerated Indian accent. He is spunky and smart but terribly uncoordinated Indian-born character. Ravi often says things such as, "Back in India, we spend hours studying." He is eager to learn American culture. His character often gets pranked by his brother and sister. Overall, his character showcased a lot of things that perpetuated a bunch of stereotypes.
Hello, good family. Who's ready to get their learn on?
Oh my. What you wearing?
It is my sherwani, only worn on very special occasions. Since my tutor says I'm now ready to start school with Emma and Luke, what better day to wear it?
Maybe on a day when your nightclub act opens in Vegas.
Luke, that happens to be a very beautiful traditional Indian shabupi.
Sherwani.
Sure. Wani. My point is, you look really great. And I know Luke is gonna look out for you today. You better look out for him.
How can I miss him? He looks like a traffic cone with hair.